Joining me now is Nicolas Hulscher, epidemiologist and administrator for the McCullough Foundation, with a BS from Oakland University and an MPH in epidemiology from the University of Michigan. He's co-authored over 20 scientific studies on COVID vaccine injuries, SARS-CoV-2, H5N1, and autism spectrum disorder. So, Nicolas, welcome to the show. Every now and again, it strikes me the news cycle is so fast. There is so much to talk about, so much gaining attention that sometimes this topic doesn't remain at the top, which is stood. It should be. There's still people suffering, and there hasn't been accountability.
Well, thanks for having me. And you're right. This should still, the mRNA injuries and catastrophe, debacle, genocide should be at the top of the news cycle basically every single day because just how bad it really was.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're not seeing that. We still haven't seen accountability. And this needs to happen, and it needs to happen fast before the same things repeat again.
Now, when you try and say that the jabs could be linked to cancer, I mean, the latest story is James Vanderbeek. He died at the young age of 48. Now, many are saying, hey, this guy, he did not take the vaccine. There's not really any way of knowing whether he did or did not, but he is just one example of somebody young getting cancer way too soon, and it is a trend. So how are you finding links between this shot? Because I do think it's a fair argument. There are so many other toxins in our food and everything else that this administration is thankfully drawing attention to. But how are you able to make that connection between it could really definitely be this mandated shot?
Yeah, well, that Time magazine article acts like it's a mystery that, there's 18-year-olds getting colon cancer, 12-year-olds getting also colorectal cancer, 19-year-olds getting breast cancer. It's not a mystery. There's now over 100 studies showing that the COVID-19 mRNA injections are one of the largest carcinogenic exposures in history. Over 100 studies, and I'll go through a few key ones. 2 population studies were done with over 8.7 million people combined in them. And what they found was they compared the vaccinated populations to the unvaccinated. One was in South Korea, one was in Italy. Both of them found that the mRNA injections and viral vector injections, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, increased the risk of over 7 distinct types of cancer, ranging from colorectal, bladder, breast to thyroid and prostate cancer. And then overall cancer hospitalizations were up there. So we know for sure in the population data, we see the cancer signals, but mechanistically, we recently published the first peer-reviewed evidence of genomic integration of mRNA vaccine genetic material in a stage 4 bladder cancer patient. We found a segment of the DNA plasmid from the manufacturing process in a woman's chromosome 19 in her circulating tumor DNA. So it went from human to Pfizer to human. It was a chimeric non-human hybrid DNA, and this appeared to have induced her turbo cancer. So that's a mechanism. Another one, and we've also published this recently in the World Journal of Experimental Medicine, where we found that the mRNA shots literally turn off tumor suppressor genes, P53 and BRCA.
Wow.
Those genes are essential for cancer surveillance. The shots turn them off, and they turn off thousands of other genes as well. And so it's not looking good.
No, it's not. But we are thankful that we're able to share this information at least a little bit better than we were just a few years ago. However, when you see these studies shared, at least on X anyways, it always has a community note. And so that's going to be frustrating. On what basis are they able to continue to hide these studies or to discredit them?
Yeah, there's really no basis at all. They have one fraudulent study that now they keep bringing up showing that the mRNA shots somehow increase survival in some cancer patients, but it's absolutely nonsense. When you inject into the human body a synthetic, modified messenger RNA that's been modified to last very long in the body, and you tell your vital organs to produce a non-human highly pathogenic protein, that's not going to be, improving cancer outcomes. And, we could just keep going down the list of studies, though, that show it worsens survival. In fact, a recent study found that it basically cuts survival time, pancreatic cancer survival time, in half. The people who received the mRNA shots lived half as long. And so, it's cutting lifespans, it's accelerating the cancers. And honestly, they have no grounds to try and dispute this now. The evidence is clear.
How much do you think shedding is playing a role in society? Because, I mean, in my circles, obviously, I'm going to know a lot more people that did not take the shot, but are still experiencing strange symptoms or getting sicker more often. Do you think that that could be related due to shedding?
Yeah, shedding's a possibility. We recently identified messenger RNA from Pfizer in an individual's exosomes, which are these circulating bubbles in the body, act as messengers 3.5 years after his last shot. Exosomes can be, apparently exhaled through breath, secreted through bodily secretions,
Yikes.
sweat, etc., breast milk. And then if you have sexual intercourse, this can also possibly transmit. And so, since we're finding this mRNA 3.5 years later, yeah, shedding could most definitively be playing a role, but a more minor one. Getting directly
Yeah.
injected is much more potent.
Yeah, absolutely. Something else you've been sharing a lot and sounding the alarm on is how these vaccine manufacturers, they're switching a lot of these typical vaccines to an mRNA model and the danger in that, as well as how MMR it is more deadly than measles. I'm constantly seeing the legacy media reporting, especially here in Texas outbreak of measles, and they're attributing it to this campaign of fear. But you're sharing studies that show that the MMR shot is actually more deadly than measles. So, do you even think that there's truth to less people getting the MMR contributing to the outbreaks? And how serious do you think that is?
Well, what we showed here is we basically showed that the MMR and MMRV vaccines, there's no rationale to be giving them at this point in time. When you look at that graph, and we looked at the vaccine adverse event reporting system, official CDC, FDA data, we looked at it. And when the vaccines kill or are linked to 2,600% more deaths than measles infection for the past 30 years. That is a serious debacle, serious disaster, absolutely foolish. The vaccine should never kill more than the infection, never, especially 2,600% more. And remember, VAERS is underreported. So we could multiply that by about 30. We might get up to 80,000 percent more deaths with these vaccines than measles infection. There was only 7 measles deaths in the past 30 years. And so it's not looking good for that. We found these children died of sudden cardiac arrest, SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, encephalitis, seizures, and 25% were hospitalized. Over half died within 2 weeks, and over half of them died within ages 1 to 1.5, right when they get these shots. And so it's very damning information.
So heartbreaking and sad, especially the parents that wake up after they made these decisions thinking they were doing the best by their children to keep them safe, and it was actually a kill shot, to be quite frank. But as far as change, you're bringing forward this evidence. It continues to get shoved under the rug. We're not taken seriously. Rand Paul thankfully has brought legislation just last week, I believe, to finally strip liability protection, because again, if they're going to gaslight us over and over again that these shots are also safe, then they need to put their money where their mouth is. So he introduced this federal legislation, so that we can finally remove the liability protection. How confident are you that we can see something like that go through?
Yeah, this bill that Senator Rand Paul recently introduced needs to pass, right? To actually, if we want to make America healthy again, this bill has to pass. We're not going to be able to do it if it doesn't. because since 1986, through the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, the vaccine makers and the vaccine cartel have had full liability protection against all injuries, deaths, disabilities, autism, chronic diseases, you name it. They get away with it and nothing happens. And so if this bill passes, they won't get away with it. They'll have to pay out all of the damages and lifetime amounts of damages, particularly for kids with autism, and they will go bankrupt and they will be forced to make safer vaccines. They won't be able to roll out untested injections anymore. You have to remember that all of the current vaccines on the childhood vaccine schedule, not one of them were licensed by the FDA based on a double-blind, long-term placebo-controlled trial. Not one. So they're basically largely untested, and this will stop that in its tracks. And we have to remember our recent study, our determinants of autism spectrum disorder, we found that the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act sparked the autism epidemic. Right after that passed, all of a sudden doses, they got like 7, 8 doses. It shot up to about 72 doses by age 18, and it tracks perfectly with autism cases. Now 1 in 31 kids. Over 3% of American children have autism now as a result of this act. And so this is great. This has got to pass.
Dr. Andy Wakefield was a very early person sounding the alarm on this issue, and he was persecuted, discredited, all of this. What is it going to take for this to be taken? I mean, can we get, since they won't take that study that he put together seriously, or they say something's wrong with it, do we have other studies happening right now or in the near future to make this connection?
Well, I'll tell you the study we just did, Determinants of Autism Spectrum Disorder, the one I just mentioned, Dr. Andy Wakefield is a co-author with us on this study, and we basically proved beyond or without a reasonable doubt that, yeah, that actually childhood vaccination, early timed and compound, which means multiple doses given during critical neurodevelopmental windows, are the single most dominant risk factor for autism spectrum disorder. And we looked at literally every single possible cause of autism, and it's without a doubt the vaccine. So, everybody go check that study out. Very important. We sent it to HHS, and a few weeks later, they changed the language on their website to reflect that they cannot say that vaccines do not cause autism.
How confident are you with the current administration? RFK Jr. has been great when it comes to this MAHA agenda, but I constantly hear rumblings that Big Pharma is still in charge, that he's being undermined. Do you have any inside knowledge, or what are your thoughts on that?
What appears to be the case here is Secretary Kennedy, cannot make all of the changes he may want to make. We know for sure, at least, I think that the FDA leadership is compromised. We see that because the FDA's own scientists wanted to put a black box warning on the mRNA shots, and apparently Marty Makary, FDA commissioner, and Vinay Prasad declined that, and they did not put the black box warning on. So we didn't even get that. And then recently they refused to look at an mRNA injection licensing proposal from Moderna for the flu. They turned that down, but then all of a sudden today, now they're going to review it again. And so I don't know what's going on. It appears there's still corruption running rampant in HHS, and now they're changing the tune from vaccines to only focusing on food, it appears, as midterms approach. And so, I hope we can, change the trajectory, keep the focus on what has happened to Americans for the past 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we all need to do our part in making sure that this stays in the news cycle, have all these distractions with Epstein and everything else. But this is too important of an issue. It will go down in the history books as one of the biggest assaults on humanity. And so we have to play our part in trying to ask for accountability and embark change. I want to encourage people to follow your Substack and follow you at Nick Hulscher on X, because you're constantly posting these studies that folks can share and try and educate others with. Do you have any final thoughts or anything else you wanted to tell me before we let you go?
Yeah, just keep spreading the word, keep sharing all of the studies that are coming out, and I think we can make a difference. There's right now there's large efforts ongoing to finally restrict or ban these injections in multiple states. Many legislative efforts are ongoing. We are actively involved in many of these, and there might be some positive news soon, but stay tuned for that.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Nick, because we do tend to constantly look to DC. Obviously, this is called DC Dispatch, but some of the biggest differences can be made closer to home in your community, in your local, and then in your state legislature. So that is such a great point. If it's just too much of a swamp and too much corruption to break through, you can encourage more centralized accountability and protections. And so that's such a great reminder. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I think we often forget that element, that we can make the biggest difference closest to home. Well, thank you so much. And again, please follow at Nick Hulscher, NiCHulscher on X. Follow his Substack and get the latest in the studies that you can share and warn others. We want to protect these babies. We want to protect our next generation. And now we're armed with information. So there's no excuses. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.